Hey there, this is the White Fan and today I'm probably going to burn my career with you guys because today I'll be, critically analyzing one of my photographs from 2 years back. This was the first photograph, the first portrait photograph of my career that got featured in several exhibitions and online platforms. So, without any further ado, let's just get started. Let's take a closer look into the photo. So, now when I'm looking at this photograph 2 years later, I'm kind of fascinated by the number of errors that I can see just by a glance, and which is why I just grabbed my camera here and making this video, because this thing needs to be told for. So the first one of them is not an error but a case of preference, which is a rule of thirds. So if you take a closer look into this photograph, this one follows the rule of thirds in a quite nice manner. But the center, the subject is at the center, which is technically right by the rule of photography, because her eye is almost at the center of the entire frame, but pro would place her here or on the left intersection, preferably on the left intersection. This one is more important here. If you take a closer look here into the foreground, the piece of land that that is working on the foreground, this particular piece of land has irregular visual weightage to the photograph, which means left side of the piece of land is contributing less to the photograph than the right side. It is quite more. To be specific, this much of difference between these two sides, the foreground, which is why if you take a look, the image is slightly disbalanced. It is not balanced correctly right at the center. The anchor point is not just working in this photograph. But what I could have done is just take a closer look into Akira. She's standing in a right angle triangular position, and with a hypotenuse, this side, the side opposite to the right angle of a triangle is hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is on the left side, and this thing contributes to the visual weightage distribution in a bad way. It disbalances it even more. So I'd have really liked if instead of on the left side the hypotenuse would have been the right, just like if you can select Akira here and vertically flip the subject, and then it would be a very, very good example of composition. But it's not just working here. So every single photographer across the world hates themselves for this mistake, and that is cropping. Photographers forget to crop photographs after editing. You see, when you edit a layer, there are several adjustment layers, several filter layer, effects layer, so many different things goes on into a photograph, and the byproduct of all of these effects goes on the corner of a frame. If this is the frame, imagine this is a cooking pan, and whatever you put in there, whatever goes in there, makes up a beautiful image. But the byproducts, the bad material, the side effects of all the effects, every single thing you put there will go and accumulate at the corners of the photograph. That is not, you take a closer look, it accumulated at this corner and I forgot to crop it, even at somewhat on the left corner, left bottom, and we forgot to crop it, and that is a crime by nature in photography world, at least in my point. Let us talk about editing. Now in editing there are a couple of mistakes that I did. The first one is highly subjective and second one is objective. The first one is unrealistic shadows and highlights. You see, the sun is here at the center, which means it should shower light a slightly bit more on the left. But in this case, we are getting way too much light in comparison to the light on the right hand side, which is, creating a disbalance of brightness across this frame. You see, this portion is darker, far more darker than, the lighter section. You can take a look here at the shadows. These are the greenish shadows, and these are the golden highlights, right? We can see that. But the difference between the shadows and the highlight is extraordinarily high in my opinion. In the chromatic circle, this thing moves away farther from the analog or complementary setup that this is more of an analog. Since I'm using a greenish shade, and with that golden highlights, so this forms up a kind of analogous color palette rather than complementary one. And when we go for the analogous color palette, this one is the analogous color palette there. It is highly relatable that we shouldn't be using a very high range of dynamic range, because that takes something away from the image, and that is how I know it. That is how I see it. Which is why I really do not like the specific part of color grading here, which is, it looks fine, blah blah blah, this and that, but at some point it just is a foolish error that I should have seen before. So that being said, now this is the problem with photographs. I'm not liking the photographs I've taken 2 years back, and that is today's lesson. You are not going to like today's version tomorrow, because we are constantly growing, we are constantly upgrading ourselves, and we are working on ourselves. So people, work today, live today, and just do a bit better tomorrow. Slowly, one day, you will just sit yourself on a desk at the corner of your room and you will judge yourself. 2 years back, the old version of me, the slouch, sloth, whatever. But I'm proud, I'm not that person anymore, and I'm sure you too will be. So without that being said, let's take some break. I should sign up. Bye. Take care, boys.